The human-animal bond is a term that is used to define the relationship between people and animals. And probably the best definition of it, the one that we really hope people will consider, is that it should be mutually beneficial for both people and animals.
Our idea about animals and their place in our societies, I think, has several different starting points. People did not hesitate to consider animals as part of a sentient, understanding, feeling type of culture. However, there was a fairly substantial shift during the Enlightenment period in Europe, particularly with the philosopher Descartes. Descartes' idea that in order to be a thinking, feeling being, you had to actually think about it, therefore took animals out of consideration and allowed fairly horrific practices like performing surgeries on live animals without any type of pain medication, simply restrained.
I see so much now. I mean, I see so much animal abuse and animal neglect. I don't want to say that it's hard to remember the worst one, but they're all so bad. We see a lot of animals that are just starved down to literally just skin and bones. We see animals that have been kicked in the face, that their jaws have been broken. I saw 2 cats that were tied together and thrown in the river and drowned, that they were tied together and they drowned. I'm assuming children. I would hate to think that any adult have put fireworks in the cats and set the fireworks on fire and blown up the cat's anus. We see that several times a year. I mean, but I think that also that some people really just don't know any better. I mean, they really just don't, they really think that's fine that the dog lives out back on a chain, or they really think that's fine that the dog has a broken bone and they're not going to the vet, or they really think that that's okay that they haven't had given their dog water all day on a 94-degree day. I mean, they think that's okay. I see a lot of horrible, horrible things. I mean, a lot of horrible, horrible, horrible things.
We get a call from a lady. She had a cat on her patio, was really injured. She didn't know what happened. The cat had been beaten with a baseball bat. He lost a leg, had lots of neurological issues, and it stayed really sweet.
There's many good cases and some that have scarred me that I'll never forget. You know, one of the, I think, first pit bull situations that I really saw where it was enlightening to the kind of abuse that this breed endures was a white female, completely emaciated, and we named her Hope because she, even being so thin and she couldn't walk, we carried her, and she had a collar, a training collar that these dog fighters like to use that was very thick canvas. It was just very heavy because they think it bulks up their neck and makes them look nice and strong, but she was so weak, she couldn't hold her head up. So when I took her in my arms, she still managed to kiss me. And so it was just astounding to me that this dog that had been through all of this still had the ability to show love.
Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill with utilitarianism challenged that idea of Descartes because they asked the question, can these animals suffer? It's not if they can think or if they can talk, but can they feel pain? It's taken a while, but we've really started to understand that animals do have emotional reactions similar to ours, particularly with regards to pain.
It's my experience and my position that animal abuse or animal cruelty includes both acts and omissions. So you can either actively harm an animal by beating it, poisoning it, hanging it, or you can passively harm an animal by withholding food, water, an appropriate shelter, and necessary veterinary care. But it's all under this big umbrella of cruelty to animals.
I don't know that people understand that we are bound by ordinances and laws, and there's only so much that we can do before we break the law ourselves. I mean, I think that when people will call in about a complaint about a dog that is And I admit, living a miserable life on a chain that it never has any human interaction. And but if we go out and the chain's 10 foot long and the dog has a doghouse, it's an insulated doghouse with the proper bedding and food and water, and the dog's current on its rabies vaccination, there's nothing illegal about that. I mean, as sad as that is, there's nothing illegal about somebody doing that. And I think that in some cases somebody can look at that, a human can look at that and say, oh, old Bobo has a great life out there. He loves it when I go out there and I pet him on the head once a day, and that dog loves it. That dog's got a better life than a lot of kids, people will say when we go out. Well, no, it doesn't. That dog has a horrible life. That dog lives in a 10-foot dirt ring of its own feces and urine and never leaves that 10-foot ring. So that's neglect, but I also think that there's a little bit of cruelty mixed in with that. Whether you know that's cruelty or not, I would make the argument that that's cruel.
Certainly the more moderate cases where there is little or no harm to the animal, it is totally appropriate to adopt a position of education. The case that comes to mind are people that leave an animal in a hot car, where they run an errand and they don't realize that the temperature, it can be like an oven in a car. And what's different between animals and humans is that animals cannot get rid of the heat. They don't sweat like a human. In those cases, I would say 99% of the time, the person who leaves their pet in the car doesn't do it on purpose.
In many cases, children have a relationship with an animal, but what they're exposed to is watching that member of the family, their pet, potentially harmed in some form or fashion. We'll see children who develop these capacities for cruelty because they have low empathy, because they're more callous towards others, and that places them at greater risk of hurting other people later in their lives.
A man was tired of his dog, a pet Basenji, who was growing deaf and blind and incontinent, and he shot the dog in the face with a BB rifle in front of his 6-year-old child. It was an older dog that he, the offender, had adopted as a puppy. We charged him both with cruelty and with child abuse. He was convicted of that. But it just broke my heart that he treated an animal that was in his house that long and do it in front of his son.
In my first couple months, I went to a house just to do a welfare check on a dog, and the mother let me in. The house was filthy, and she told me the dog lived in this room, so she opened the room, and it was very obviously the little girl's room, and the dog had been living in there, and there was feces all over on the little girl's bed. You know, that child was living there as well. I mean, how sad is it for the dog, but this is this little girl's life too. We definitely see, you know, horrible things that involve children and people as well, and that was reported to CPS.
Two of the cases I did find out about while I was a DA were two juveniles charged with and convicted of sexual assault on a child who went for their pre-sentence psychological evaluation and disclosed during those evaluations that they had been having sexual encounters with their pets. So there was a connection there, but we didn't realize it until they actually went for the formal court evaluation. I think that the experts have to keep their eyes open, but there's a crossover of these paraphilias, if you will.
The link between domestic violence and animal cruelty is one of the earliest places that we really made the connection in what's referred to as the link. And the link, as you may know, relates to the co-occurrence of animal abuse and human violence. The story of kind of how that emerged was done through studies that asked women who were in violent relationships about whether or not their partners had ever tried to harm or threaten or kill their companion animals. 50 to 55% of those women identified that was an experience that they had had.
We've actually had more contact and connection with women's abuse type situations. There's a local group here called Prevail, which works with battered women and trying to get them into safe situations, get them back onto their feet. And many times they've seen that a woman will not leave an abusive situation because she is afraid of what will happen to her pet. Retaliation against her pet is a very common thing, so they'll actually stay in a horrible situation because they don't want their pet to be killed.
Jurisdictions now have created a registry, like a sex offender registry, to keep track of and a record of people that are convicted of cruelty to animals. They're starting to recognize the importance of knowing where these people are, where they live, and what communities they reside in.
Animal abuse and cruelty doesn't just happen on Animal Planet and the TV shows that you see there, Animal Cops in Atlanta, Animal Cops in Houston. It happens right here. It's right here in our backyard. It takes all of us to make all of this bad go away.
We have animals in our lives and at such a high prevalence that it's really important for us to understand how these relationships matter. Animals, for the most part, have kind of a fairly simple set of expectations for relationships with people. Animals really don't react to the fact that somebody might look different or present differently than the average person. That's not going to be an issue for that animal. And the resulting impact of that for the person is that there's this sense of unconditional acceptance. Well, I'm a firm believer that the more we know about one another, including animals, the more we start to value those connections and relationships.
I was working in a veterinary's office, and I came home from work one day with my daughter tagging along, and some young boys had told me they had seen a kitten in my yard. So I took her into work with me the next day. Dr. T thought she might have been a hit-by-car kitten. So they kind of bounce back from things like that. You give them some prednisone, you cage confine them. Well, a month rolled by, and she wasn't getting any better. And he thought, well, we need to do an x-ray at that point. And someone had shot her with a BB, and it was in the T3, T2 junction, and that's why she couldn't walk. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do with this kitten? She's running around the cat trees, will climb me up and down, great front leg strength, interacting and acting just like a kitten would act. I'm thinking, I can't put this kitten down. She's happy. She has a great quality of life. And I just kind of stumbled into becoming Cat's Haven.
Paw Chicago was founded back in 1997 by our founder, Paula Faceas, and back then the pet overpopulation epidemic was so bad in Chicago that more than 42,000 dogs and cats were being euthanized alone in the city. That was over 800 a week. And our founder found that out and was just horrified, and is such a progressive person, and just realized, there has to be a better solution, and no kill is definitely the way.
Well, I think the biggest difference is that we're a government agency. So we're directly held accountable by every taxpayer in Delaware County, whereas they're held accountable by an 8 or 10 person board, or however large their board is. They focus solely on animal care. They don't have anything to do with ordinance violations or state statute violations. Then they really are an animal control agency, where that's our primary responsibility, is providing animal control, and animal care is just kind of a bonus, I guess you could say, for the Animal Care and Services Department.
It's a collaboration between us and local government. We have a contract with Hamilton County, like any other vendor would have a contract, to be the one spot where they will drop off any animal control related cases they're investigating, bite cases, or even just stray animals that they may find. And they're letting people here who love animals or are compassionate about animals be the ones who are operating the facility and determining their fate, which is really, I think, the best model that you could possibly have.
Unfortunately, a government-run, taxpayer-based facility cannot turn away any animal. They have to be there to receive those animals no matter what, because they are funded by our taxpayers. For those of us that are at ARF, we passionately care about these animals and would love to be able to help every single one, but we are not duty-bound to do so. Therefore, when we're full, unfortunately, we can say we are full and we have to turn people away, which is heartbreaking in and of itself. The animal shelter cannot do that.
I'll never euthanize an animal just because I don't have room for it. I know that we're full very frequently, and it is hard work, but it's not as difficult as one would think to get a healthy, happy animal out of an animal shelter. It's not as difficult at all. If I have a shelter that's full of, 102 dogs that are wonderful, happy dogs that are wagging their tail, that love humans, that love each other, that are healthy, then I won't euthanize any of them, no matter how full we get.
Truly the way to make Chicago a no-kill city, which is our goal, would be to prevent the unwanted litters from being born and entering the shelter system in the first place. With the spay-neuter clinic in 2001 and then the opening of the adoption center here in 2007, not only has the euthanasia rate dropped by more than 60%, but we're able to provide over 18,000 free and low-cost spay-neuter surgeries a year, and last year we were able to find homes for 5,606 dogs and cats.
The overpopulation problem is people not spaying and neutering their pets. It's easy, if you don't spay and neuter, they're gonna breed and we're gonna have more and more. And so we're setting animals up for failure by not getting them spayed or neutered.
The last thing that you want is if you have this novelty pet that's so cute for the first 3 weeks and then that cuteness wears off to you after a while. Well, 6 months down the road, after the first heat cycle, and then you have a whole litter of 6 to 10 other novelties that are all going to wear off. Animals shouldn't be looked at as novelties. They should be looked at as what they are, which is living, breathing beings that feel and that require everything that a human child or a human adult would require. But the only difference is a child will be able to one day turn into a teen and then turn into an adult where they won't be dependent on you. That animal is going to be dependent on you forever. I mean, it's never going to be able to pour itself food. It's never going to be able to open the door and let it go and use the restroom outside. It's never going to be able to tell you, hey, my stomach hurts, I need to go to the doctor. I mean, so people need to be conscious when they sign up for that, no matter what, that animal is with them as their responsibility until that animal passes away.
Maybe not in my time, but in your time, it really will be different. And that will be a great, great, great day. Then we finally made it, when nobody needs us anymore. That would be a good legacy to leave. I hope I do.